Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As every member in this House should know, we are in a climate crisis with a closing window of opportunity to act. I'll share with you the words of the UN Secretary General on this. Quote, "We are on a highway to climate hell with our foot on the accelerator. We are in the fight of our lives and we are losing. Our planet is fast approaching tipping points that will make climate chaos irreversible. The global climate fight will be won or lost in this crucial decade on our watch." In the face of this crisis, as Greens, we are deeply concerned that the so-called Canadian Sustainable Jobs Act, Bill C-50, remains a massive missed opportunity and an example of checkbox politics. Rather than substance, this is about checking a partial box from this government's supply and confidence agreement with the NDP. There are some in this House who have decried this bill as central planning, destroying the economy of Western Canada. None of this is true. I have the bill here. I'll share with you what it will actually do. In fact, it'll do three things. It's going to create a group to give the minister advice. They're going to be called the Sustainable Jobs Partnership Council. Secondly, the bill will require a Sustainable Jobs Action Plan. As of the current version of the bill, this is required by December 31st, 2040. As Greens, we're glad the government has proposed amendments to bring this sooner. We've put forward an amendment to bring it forward as soon as possible. We've suggested December 31st of this year. Again, we are in a crisis that demands urgent action. Third, the bill creates a Sustainable Jobs Secretariat to help the minister implement the act. That's it. In the words of public policy researcher and author Seth Klein, it's a snoozer. There is nothing on, well, actually, the words just transition. Those were long forgotten by the time we moved from the supply and confidence agreement to this bill. They are words that are a key principle of the Paris Agreement. The words just transition were fought for to be in the Paris Agreement by unions. Workers across this country advocated for that to be the case. There is nothing in this bill about meaningful investments in truly sustainable jobs, like a just transition transfer that could be linked to climate infrastructure projects with training and apprenticeships, the same way we already have a Canada Health transfer. There is nothing on provincial and territorial just transition agencies to ensure that these funds would flow to affected workers. There's nothing on a youth climate corps, a federally funded job training and placement program that exists already in other jurisdictions that could ensure that young people know that there will be good green jobs available to them in the economy in the years to come, as the MP for Victoria has proposed a motion for. There's nothing on investments in training and apprenticeships in the skilled trades. The carpenters, electricians, and plumbers will need to be supporting as we move to retrofit buildings across the country, homes, businesses, industrial buildings. These are good, well-paid jobs that this bill could have been investing in. There's nothing in the bill that talks about the coal workers that this government consulted with in 2018, made promises to, and have since provided no supports to them on things like job retraining that were promised to them. There's nothing in this bill when it came to block and green amendments at committee. Of course, there were various partisan tactics that led to that not getting debated, but when it came to the actual vote, none of those were accepted to be in the bill. There's also nothing here when it comes to actually investing in the economy of the future. As Greens, we have been putting forward that it's well past time that we put in place a windfall profit tax on the oil and gas industry. This is, as you know, a measure that has already been taken by this government when it comes to banks and life insurance companies. It would be just a 15% tax on profits over $1 billion. Now, the largest oil and gas companies in the country, the most recent year we have the numbers for, they made $36 billion in profit. If we were to put in place even just a 15% windfall profit tax on profits over $1 billion, we'd have $4.2 billion that could be invested in affordability measures for Canadians. Invested in whether it's investing in workers that need that support, like some of the measures I mentioned just earlier, whether it's investments in apprenticeships and job retraining. Those are the investments we could be making. It's important that we point to revenue tools along with the measures that could have been in this bill. But none of it was. Again, 3 measures we're talking about here. 3 measures that put in place a council, an action plan, and a secretariat. In the face of a climate emergency, at a time when workers across this country, many of which are anxious, recognizing that they deserve supports. This was the moment to do it. This legislation was an opportunity to demonstrate to them that they are being listened to, unlike coal workers from 2018, to build trust with them. And it's why we will continue to advocate for better. I encourage this government to read A Good War by Mr. Klein. I'd encourage them to act like they understand the crisis we are in, because the fact is this remains a unique moment in time. One where we can stand up and say that it's possible for us to hold on to 1.5 degrees. It's possible to speak to a young person today, recognizing the enormity of the challenge we face, and to say that their government could take action at federal, provincial, and municipal levels to invest in good jobs for them in the future and to take action while we still can. And yet that's not what's here. And so we will continue to advocate for better. We're going to work with all parties who are willing to do so. I'll point out again that it was the Bloc who had proposed amendments that would have improved this bill, just as Greens did. We've brought more forward at report stage to continue that advocacy. We will continue to do so because we will recognize that we are living in a unique moment, one where we still have this opportunity to act. We encourage this government to take it.
Well done.
Questions and comments? Kitchener Maltire, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if my colleague could provide some further thoughts in regards to the benefits of the Sustainable Job Action Plan. And we're talking about the, every 5 years, and I do believe there's a great deal of merit for that, and I don't quite understand why it is that the official opposition would see that as a bad thing. It's more of a longer-term plan that I believe can have a very positive outcome when we start consulting with Canadian workers and others in order to ultimately come up with this plan. From his perspective, what does he think?
The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member for Winnipeg North is right in that an action plan is a good thing. The concern is it doesn't meet the moment we're in. Talking about an action plan, whether it's December 31st, 2040, or whatever it ends up getting moved up to as a result of votes this evening, is not recognizing that we need investments today. We need action today. We need talk of a just transition transfer today, a youth climate corps today. The idea of one day in the future writing an action plan that could have ideas in it that would have helped us if we'd done it in 2024, that's the reality of what our kids are going to look back at this moment and say, what were they thinking? And so, yes, he's right. An action plan's a good thing. It's not nearly enough, though, someday far in the future, if we recognize we're in the midst of an emergency.
Questions and comments? Kitchener Maltire, the Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Well, I would just make a comment that I want to acknowledge the Greens for being honest about what this bill is all about. I'd invite the member to expand, if he wants, on his thoughts about why there was a study done previously called the Just Transition Entirely, and then the Liberals changed the name. The Liberals and the NDP changed the name at the last minute. But as he pointed out, this bill actually won't deliver any jobs or skills training programs, particularly itself. And he brought up the issue of trust, which I think is paramount. And it's certainly what Conservatives tried to embed in this legislation through our amendments. The Liberals even rejected a Conservative amendment that called for a fair and equitable approach, specifically to ensure social support. But the truth is that polls show that Conservatives don't know what the just transition is, but once they find out, they don't want it, they can't afford it, they don't want new taxes to pay for it. And they want bigger polluters around the world to take action before Canadians are punished, and it costs Canadians even more. But I just want to make a comment that it would be great if the member would also recognize the fact that on Bill C-50, this legislation itself, because of the procedural tactics from the Liberals NDP, not a single Canadian impacted by it will actually be able to be heard by members of Parliament on Bill C-50, this legislation itself.
For Kitchener Centre.
Thank you to the member for Lakeland for the question. There were procedural games on all sides when it came to December and the discussion on amendments to this bill. To her point about trust, I think that's a really important one. And that point we can agree on, that we need to be doing more, to be more honest with workers about what is actually in this bill. She mentioned the words just transition. Obviously, this is a term that's been deeply turned into a partisan context. The reality is the term just transition speaks of justice for workers. We need to center the interests and rights of workers in the transition to a clean economy. I'm disappointed that that term has become as politicized as it is. I'm disappointed it's not in this legislation because it's workers who fought for it to be in the Paris Agreement.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague from the Green Party for his excellent speech. You know, Mr. Speaker, I'll use the example of the Parti québécois. There were 3 members elected in the election. They were ahead in the elections a year later. And, in a year and a half, I wonder if Canadians will do something similar. Maybe the Green Party will move ahead in the polls before the next election. So, in the context of this bill, if he were in power, if the Green Party were in power, what would their bill on the just transition have looked like? What measures would they have ensured were in there that could have made the difference and which would have made it so that we, didn't have to be constantly debating whether debate had been blocked? Just a little bit of time left. The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
Merci, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a great colleague from my friend from the Bloc Québécois. If the Greens were in power, the Greens would have made the investments and done the things that I spoke about in my speech that experts and workers across the country have been pressuring the government to put in place, like, for example, a transfer for a just transition.